Hello and welcome to the Bare Necessities Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon. And just to clarify, to get this out in the open from the start, I am not an expert in anything, especially parenting. Now, moving forward, you've obviously gone out of your way to listen to this recording, and for that, I thank you. I also feel that if we're going to foster any sort of trust between myself and those of you listening at home, or in your car, or while you exercise, at work, that kind of thing, it's only fair that I introduce myself and tell you a little about me. So, let's get started. Welcome. All right, I feel it's only fair to start from the beginning. I was born in Colorado, raised in Davenport, Iowa. I was a pretty typical kid, C-average student, never in trouble with the law. I always had dreams of entertaining people, whatever facet that may be. I've been obsessed with films, comedians, and professional wrestling since I was very young. Every weekend, my friends and I would put together backyard wrestling shows, whether it be at my house or my friend Troy's. When I was about 17 years old, my friend Andrew drug us along to this independent wrestling show in Donahue, Iowa. And it wasn't big and flashy like WWE, but they were way further along than we were. They had an actual wrestling ring. The wrestlers putting on the matches looked like they knew what they were doing. They had a larger roster, which meant they didn't have one guy playing three different characters like we did. From the first night, all I kept thinking was, how do I get involved with these guys? And after a while, I ended up debuting as a character by the name of Baryshnikov Smirnov on my 18th birthday of all days. I spent the next few years putting on shows with the company now known as SCW Pro in the Quad Cities. I even got the opportunity to share locker rooms with some very well-known wrestlers, a couple Hall of Famers, and some guys that you can now see wrestling for WWE, Impact, and abroad. I had a lot of fun during those years, and I'm happy to talk about it. Once I stopped wrestling, I didn't know what my next project would be. That was until I received a call from a guy that I met through SCW. I was actually out eating with my family when I got a call from Chris Starman. He and his buddy Tony Boyer put together some charity shows for many causes, such as the Junior Diabetes Research Foundation and our local Autism Awareness Center, just to name a couple. Their next charity event was going to include some very funny local comedians and a few people that had never attempted stand-up before. Now, I was one of the few people that had never attempted stand-up, but I've always had a great respect for the people that could do it and make it look so effortless. He told me, I know you've done stand-up before, but I always thought you were funny when I was drunk, so I wanted to see if you'd be interested in performing. I jumped on board and had a pretty good showing despite being ridiculously nervous. After that, I was hooked. Over the years, I've been a part of many more charity shows, had the opportunity to meet some fantastic lesser-known comics and even a few well-known celebrities. I've been very lucky to have such great opportunities, both in stand-up and professional wrestling. So, actually, one of those opportunities was to meet my wife. I met her in mid-2005, and to be completely transparent with you, my first impression was that she was very rude, and not someone I saw myself marrying 8 years later. But that was the case. Despite my negative first impression of her, we talked more, and I got to know her, and we ended up hitting it off. We started dating. I got to know her son, Dominic. He's never been the shy type with me. Actually, the first time I met him, he started the conversation. Just, "Hi, I'm Dominic. Who are you?" And since then, I've spent more time trying to impress this kid than I care to admit. We've been to theme parks, wrestling shows, carnivals, comic book shops, you name it. Also that I could impress this 4-year-old kid who is now, all these years later, now becoming a man. And he's always been smart. He never needed me for that. He and his mom have always been very in tune with science, math, history, that sort of thing. Very book smart. I just always hoped that I could influence him in the other stuff along the way. In 2013, my wife and I finally got married after being together off and on since about early 2006. And shortly after, the three of us, myself, my wife, and Dominic, moved to Corpus Christi, Texas. And while in Texas, we talked a bit more about having more kids. And in early 2014, after a successful tubal ligation surgery, we found out that my wife was pregnant. On January 30th, 2015, our son Jack was born. Those first few months were pretty hectic, but what I remember most was this feeling of like just pure love and duty, I guess. This overwhelming need to protect and provide anything and everything I had just to see like another smile from my new bouncing baby boy. Like it was everything to me. And almost a year and a half later, my wife told me that she was pregnant, this time with our daughter, and on January 19th, 2017, our daughter Rowan was born. The familiar feeling of pure love and duty came over me again. It's definitely renewed. But this time, the feeling of fear and panic came with it. Just how do you parent a girl? I've been a boy since I could remember. I know how to be a boy, and I'm still learning how to not screw this up along the way. As you can tell, I may have been overthinking it just a bit, but since she's been here, I don't know how to describe it other than she calms me down. I can have the worst of days filled with stress and anxiety and fear, but she helps me focus, and in today's world, that is priceless. She gives me peace of mind. Now, when I first started getting interested in podcasting, I didn't exactly know what I wanted to talk about. Quite a few people told me to talk about what I care about. So my friend Jake McDowell and I started a podcast about stand-up and seeing the humor in everyday life, and we called it the Taco Tuesday Podcast. I also wanted to chat with other creative types and entertainers and find out what makes them tick. So we went ahead and started the Therapy is a Joke podcast. Then after that, my friends Johnny Wisdom, Stephen Holsing, Ryan Tappendorf, and I started a podcast about professional wrestling called the Slamburger and French Fries Podcast. Silly name. I know. I like silly names. All of those podcasts have been fun to make, and I'm very proud of them, but I still felt like I was missing something. So I started developing this idea for a show. It started off as an idea for a YouTube show. A show where I, a self-proclaimed idiot, tried to learn how to do certain day-to-day things that I overlooked or took for granted in the past. I also wanted to discuss these things with you, with other parents. I felt that I didn't know enough or enough about much of anything useful, really. So the only logical step was to step on the grenade, more or less, and put myself out there. To use this podcast to not celebrate my ignorance as a parent and a human, but really to show that it's okay not to know everything, to show that it's okay to admit when and where you can use some improvement. That is why I started the Bare Necessities podcast, and this is why you're listening to me babble. That is, that's basically it. That's the mission statement of this show is just I want to collaborate with other parents to make this next generation kind of stand out, stand head and shoulders above the last generation, be above my generation, and just make a difference. And that starts with the parents, I think. But yeah, that's about it for my introduction. Sorry, it was lengthy. But if you've listened to me this far, this is the part of the show where I ask you to get involved. I want to hear from you, parents, step-parents, grandparents. I want to hear your stories, your worries, your concerns. At my house currently, for example, we're working on potty training for my 3-year-old and my 1-year-old. Admittedly, it's going a little smoother with my daughter, who is about 1.5 now. She seems to be jumping at the chance to be potty trained, whereas my son just wants to do anything but use the potty. His pediatrician has said that boys take a little bit longer and will go when they're ready, but we're closing in on that time where soon he'll be going to pre-kindergarten, and sending your kids in pull-ups is still frowned upon, as it should be. So we'd like for both of them to be potty trained before that point, and there's frustration on both sides, and you can definitely tell that it's taking a toll on everyone's sanity. So I pose this question to anyone listening: have you had a similar experience trying to potty train your little ones? How did you make it work? I want to hear from you. I want to know that I'm not the only parent dealing with this, or that has dealt with it. I always get so annoyed at those stories of, oh yeah, my kid was perfect the whole way through, didn't give me any struggle. You know what? That's fantastic for you, but that does nothing for where I'm at. So I'm looking for the parents that have heard or been through the stories of struggling with their little ones, trying to work this thing out. Because I feel like it's a team effort. It takes a village, that kind of thing. I don't know. I need some tips and tricks, because this proud papa is struggling to make it work. I kind of feel like I'm failing him if I can't figure out a way to make this make sense to him, you know. I also understand that it's mostly up to him, but as a parent, I know it's up to me to motivate him and want to make the change. So any helpful direction will be greatly appreciated. And as we go along, I'll probably ask more questions and try to give my opinions and stories in return, where it matters, or where I know what I'm talking about, or if I've been through something. I'll never, I don't know, I'll just try and give back, and keep this conversation going. But yeah, this will probably be another short episode. Thank you again. Thank you guys for listening. If you have any questions you'd like me to answer on the podcast, or ask for you on the podcast, feel free to follow me on Twitter at BareneckPod. You can send your questions, comments, concerns, helpful direction to bareneckpod@gmail.com. You can even text or call 563-293-3858. Like I said, I'd prefer the messages to be constructive criticism or sharing stories, but I'll be honest with you, I'll probably respond to just about anything and everything. So for the time being, thanks again. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Bare Necessities Podcast. Take care.